Hey there, and welcome back to the All Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Trucks, and today we have on the show Kristiana Mand Lakhiani. She is a depth of heart and knowledge, and she has a new book out called Becoming Flawsome. But today's conversation is deeper than that, man. It goes into self-love, understanding what that means and how it ties into just humanity as a whole. But also we can dive deeper in like parenting and the conversations, how our kids teach us so much to grow, to love, and all the nuances, and really how do you find out what's right for you and what's not right for you? And how do you make sure you don't kind of press that idea onto other people? Because sometimes what's right and you think is right may not be right. And we uncover it, unpack all of that. So today's one of those ones where like, this is one of my favorite episodes. Like just the conversation floats so smoothly, but there's a depth of understanding to what she's talking about. She doesn't state things or just random statements. There's data behind it, proof behind it. And so if you're ready to have kind of your mind blown and understand exactly what the journey to some sort of self-love is and where it ties into you, no matter what you do, corporate realm, personal development, doesn't matter. You'll see how it ties into your ability to be successful. So tune in today's episode. See you over there. Hello, and welcome into today's episode with Kristina, which is actually my wife's name, which is spelled differently, but it's Kristiana Mand Lakhiani, and she's a person who oddly I've years ago met, and ever since I've met her, she may not know, but I watched from a distance. She's an awesome human, great mom. Like she's been a servant, so she does some cool things. She actually is going to kind of come to us today and talk about life, which is I think beautiful when you have a person that's experienced a lot of life that can share from a very vulnerable, open place what she's learned to help humanity be better, which is what her focus is. So, welcome to the show, Kristina. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. And I have to say that judging by you knowing me from some of our really fun events, I'm quite sure you must have seen me dancing
Oh yes, yes I did.
covered in glitter and
Yeah, same
in
here.
odd costumes.
So if you guys, man, I mean, I don't know if the events happen anymore, but years and years ago, there was when I first entered this world, I came across this ad on YouTube. It was funny because the guy, Vishen, who ran it, was like, we didn't even market on YouTube. I'm like, well, somebody did because I saw it on YouTube. I opened up this application. I was like, they're not going to accept me. I'm not good enough for this thing. And I applied. And the next thing I know, for like 3 years, a whirlwind of these cool trips and parties. At one point, I remember being on, I want to say it was Costa Rica on a beach where they had like black light paint, black lights covering the beach. They had guys with drums that were drumming like black light water, and I was drunk.
Oh,
I was for sure drunk, and just it was like this. It was like a movie, and I remember
yeah.
like I get goosebumps right now. I'm feeling them of like how
It
cool
was
the
an epic
experience was.
party. I,
Yeah, you guys did a
I had
great job.
I was painted like a jaguar, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I came as a mountain man. I did. You know what I did? I didn't bring a costume, so I got leaves from outside and I just wrapped them around my arms and I was like a bushman. That was that was my costume.
That was Costa Rica. Yeah, that was an
Yeah.
epic party.
That was you guys, there's a whole big sloth that they made, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Big?
with an aerialist.
Yeah. Golly. Good times. Those are great times. I remember so the event you guys did, like, what I guess what was the original idea for that? Because that was just a blast. Like you guys got great speakers to come in. Where did that idea come? Is it still going on? I don't even know.
Yes, it is. It is. Of course, COVID has put everything on pause for a few years, but it's back.
Yeah.
It's happened last year. In fact, it was in Jordan, which was amazing, and
Oh
this year it's
wow.
going to be in Costa Rica, and I think we're increasing. But that's Vision. So Vision is, for those who don't know, Vision is my ex-husband, and he's the founder of Mindvalley. I'm co-founder of Mindvalley. So that was his idea.
Hmm.
His story is that he was getting bored and he wanted some cool people around, and
Yeah.
you combine you can combine work with fun, and that's what makes it magic. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been happening since 2009,
Yeah. I
non-stop.
can imagine how probably cool it is now. I get a little FOMO. I gotta go hang out, bring my wife down there
Yeah,
now.
come
Yeah,
back.
come do it. All right, so here we already started the podcast, but we started it the best way, but also opposite from what I typically do. So the first question I typically ask people is simple. I say I'm walking around Estonia, which is where you're at right now. Thank you for
Mhm.
coming on so late. But say I'm walking around, I sit down in an amazing coffee shop. I see this beautiful woman, yourself, sitting there. I don't know you, and then for some reason you feel compelled to start speaking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
Oh God, this is such a tough question for me. I'm not, I'll tell you, probably if I had to, if somebody pushed me around the corner or said that my life depends on that, of course, I'd give you an elevator pitch. But normally
Mm,
it's just against my character. I'm
yeah.
not the type of person who's going to try to impress anyone.
Okay.
It's a very strange attitude. I would actually probably let the universe take care of the things.
Mm,
Of course, I get it. Sometimes there's an opportunity and you have to do it.
yeah.
Uh, but I'm obstinate. But why should you talk to me?
No, I
I
get it.
think I'm
I
a
love
very
it.
interesting
Yeah.
person. I'm opinionated. I'm not afraid of expressing my opinions. I
Mm,
like really good conversation. You do come across as very intellectual and interesting person yourself. So I
thank
think
you.
we'd have fun.
We probably would have a great conversation. I like to talk.
Yeah,
My wife's not a fan of when I talk to people in public though, because like I have questions on what they have, what they're doing. I'm like, hey, because I'm curious. I think by
yeah.
nature, but I do have a blast talking to people. I also find maybe you'll find this too is I learned years ago to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it as my own, and that entertaining of it gives grace and
Mm.
appreciation to allow the conversation to flow smoother. So there's no judgment in when somebody says something to me.
Hmm. I think in considering that you do interviews, it's a very valuable skill because sometimes what makes interview interesting is when you place your guest in the center. And I'm not suggesting anything, but I mean, if you do a lot of them, sometimes people say things you don't agree with.
Yeah,
So if you actually, if your goal is to find out why is the person thinking in that way, that's so amazing. I have learned how many times have I heard something that I go like, no,
yeah,
but if I just bother, just take it as a goal to try to understand, okay, why did you say that? I discover so many interesting things, and sometimes I actually realize that we are not so different. We just sometimes express ourselves differently.
yeah. I think that's the case. I think there's a lot of nuances because I think as human beings, we all have different experiences. There's no way I can fully get to the understanding of one person's mind because I've never had the collection of experiences to filter it all through. But there are
Hmm.
unique situations and instances where you can have that. But then also, like you said, there's arguments. I think in your book, there's a conversation when you're talking about the weapon of love, the thought of love, and where you kind of
Ah,
have that like people say like this. She kept saying this one thing to you, like you like kind of like trolling you, like I have love for you, like no, like there's this kind of. Do you mind unsharing like or unpacking that conversation a little more?
yeah, I'm so happy you picked up on that particular chapter because I really this is my favorite chapter, in
Oh,
fact, and
good, good.
partially it's favorite because I've been in personal growth for 20 years, and I think that's the chapter where I take the liberty to poke fun at some of the things that we do, and
Mm,
it's based in the idea of spiritual bypassing,
okay.
which is John Welwood's idea. I mean, he mentioned coined the term,
Mhm.
and the idea is that we sometimes get so enamored with certain spiritual concepts and theories and ideas that we try to hide behind them uh, rather than dealing with our own problems. So that conversation that you were talking about, where I was being blasted with love, I think a lot of us experience that from time to time, where rather than going into conflict or disagreeing, the person is trying to escape an unpleasant situation by just saying like, oh, but I love you,
Yeah.
oh, but I only have love for you. It's such a classical example in psychology. I think it's called I wouldn't give it an exact term, but very often it's a form of passive aggressive behavior,
Mm,
where rather
mm,
than dealing with the conflict, we're trying to be pleasing on the surface. But
yeah.
if the feeling is unpleasant inside, it will explode sooner or later. But there are a lot of dangers with that, and one of them, which is probably the most painful to be on the receiving side, is that that actually makes you start doubting your own sanity. So when you think that you disagree and there is something to discuss, and somebody says that no,
Yeah.
but I love you, no, but it's you who is nervous. Why don't you calm down? You're like, am I insane? What's
Yeah.
going on here? Why is it my problem?
Yeah.
But
I hear that.
if you want me to go deeper into that, it might
Oh,
be a
we
very
will.
long
I think there's something there because I feel like I'm hearing like a conversation like my wife and I have, like, 'cause that's the nature of it. It's like, no, I get like, no, I sometimes when I want to fight, I think I like want to have the energy. I don't know why. I think as humans, we lean into that. But then also sometimes you don't feel heard. Like it's very flippant. It's like this,
conversation.
like it's just almost like a little thing I put up so I don't have to continue the conversation because maybe they may feel awkward in the conversation. And so I feel like it cuts communication off and I can't get to that connection, which I think actually is where love exists. It's the
Well,
disconnected connection.
You see, there's a difference because there are people whose love you do genuinely believe,
Mhm.
and actually imagine if a person really loves you and they can see that you're upset, they wouldn't cut it off even if they're uncomfortable. They
True.
would probably say, it matters, and maybe I'm uncomfortable to talk about that. Can we find another time? But
Revisit
I
it later.
understand, because that's the true sign of love. That person actually cares about your well-being.
Yeah.
If you're being dismissed as too dramatic, as too emotional,
Mm.
then at least it doesn't look like love to me. It
Yeah.
looks like
Mm.
I'm cooler than you,
Yeah.
which is
I get
when I talk about any form of manipulation, I always get very passionate because that's such a painful thing to experience.
I think, and that's, I think I missed that. When you stated that in that framing, that makes more sense. It's almost like if somebody gets you and they say, I love you, then, and in that dynamic of it all, it's like they will care enough to hear. And I get that. My wife and I'll say something, we'll battle a little bit, but then later on, it does come to a point of like, she'll hear and she'll listen. I'm sorry. Like there's
Yeah.
understanding there. But then if someone just says it, it's like, I got love for you. It's like, but if you actually love me, you'd go deeper with this. You actually, it's almost like saying that becomes a thing that's bothersome because it's like, you don't actually love me. You may have love for him, but you
Mm.
don't actually have that. So don't use that.
It's very easy. You can say I love you in a way where people get scared, and you can say I hate you, but so sweetly that people understand that you're just joking.
Yeah.
Because and it's nothing new, but the words don't convey the actual meaning of your feelings. It's usually everything about you. It's your mood, it's your
Yeah.
face, it's your voice, it's
Nonverbal.
it's how a person feels next to you. That's what conveys the feeling. Because you can watch a movie you don't not understand a word of, and you still understand how people feel.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of our emotions. So whatever beautiful words you try to mask yourself behind, it doesn't change the essence.
Yeah.
Even if you believe that this is love, but if the receiving side doesn't feel it as love, then sorry, this is just
Not
you
actually.
hoping that it is love.
Yeah.
But you mentioned also your conversations with wife. I talk about that as well in my book, because I think this is one of the most fascinating areas of our um, where we could expect improvement in our relationships with other people.
Mhm.
Is this situation where we don't speak the same words, or maybe we contradict each other, or maybe we have different interests. I think this is such a wonderful place to also dig and to see how you can learn,
Mhm.
how you can grow and transform. Because for me, this kind of contradictions, whether they're in relationships with other people or in relationships with you,
Yeah.
that's an invitation to start asking yourself, what's going on? What do I want? Who
Mhm.
am I as a person?
Yeah.
And I think it's always a wonderful beginning for transformation.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's almost like the idea that my kids teach me. There's love there, and they teach me, and it's like I got a son who has ADHD, and I grew up with it. Like I still have it to this day. I found ways to manage it. I spent a lot of time talking to myself. As crazy as that sounds, it keeps me calm. I don't have outbursts, but like I'll ask myself, why in the world is that bird doing that? Why does that color exist? Like in my head. But the idea of him doing what he does, we have this back and forth. It's palpable that the discourse we have sometimes. Not that I don't hate him,
Mhm.
but it's like I think in my head that I want him to not do what I did so he can avoid the experience I had of getting in trouble.
Mhm.
And so it leads me to go and stop that. Why are you doing that? And then I find that now I'm in this position, like you said, I'm not learning how to love him the way he needs to be loved sometimes. So it becomes a
Mhm.
great lesson.
It's yeah, children are definitely a great source of transformation for us, or growth.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, not a lot of parents go down that path. So we keep producing traumatized kids.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Traumatized parents keep producing traumatized kids who will
and,
produce traumatized kids.
and it keeps going. That is crazy.
And
Yeah, it's true.
but it is a hard job because we take such responsibility for our children, but then if we look at it um, philosophically, we really can't take upon ourselves their future fate,
Mm-mm.
and that's the painful side.
Yeah.
I do not know how old your kids are,
Oh
but
yeah.
smaller kids.
I have a freshman in college or university. He's 18 years old, and I got twins that
Yeah,
are 13, a boy and a girl. And
yeah,
interesting thing is I was a kid that was given away as like foster care, 3 years old. I grew up in a crazy environment of beaten, starved, toward all these weird things. And I wasn't adopted till I was 14, so I had a lot of trauma that
mhm,
really unsettled me. And my one north star was I just want to make sure I'm completely different from my son than what was done to me. That was the North Star, right? It's like, if this was done,
Yeah.
like, I'm not doing that. And it's hard though. It's hard to have patience because we snap in these instinctual things if this was done. So I didn't
Yeah.
put hands on my kids. I didn't cuss my kids out. I never belittled them. And what's
Yeah.
cool now is my oldest is 18, and like the other day he sent me his Instagram message. It's like, you ever seen the videos they do now where they have like, it's like dark coffee and they put cream in it and it lightens up and they have something written on the container.
No, I haven't seen them yet.
It makes you really can make, but it's like a black coffee. He sends it to me. It's a video of someone with a black coffee
Mhm.
cup. They pour cream in, and on the front it says, "You're a good dad." I was like,
Oh,
oh, like, man,
this
like it
is
just,
so awesome.
it's
Yeah.
little things. But then that's just one of three. I still got two more to make sure I don't break
And
in.
that's the age where we are supposed to let them go and trust that they can figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And how old are your kids?
So mine are 9 and 15.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that going? Is the teenager years good so far?
Oh yeah, he's a wonderful kid. I think I had hardest time with him earlier when he was a kid. He's not a neurotypical kid, so
Mm.
I was a little confused. But then when we found out what's up with him, it became super easy. I
Good.
have
Good.
wonderful children, but there's this not very serious joking that we get the kind of kids we can handle. So I guess it's
Mm.
not the best characterization for myself if my kids are so easy.
I get it, and I get what you mean. I think but it's also, I think, a matter of your own. My personal opinion. My wife, she has a business where it literally serves individuals that aren't, neurotypical, special needs for the most part. And so she has like literal, like 24/7 care homes, a day
Hmm.
program where she serves them like throughout the day. It's like kind of like an adult daycare, she calls it. So it's like you have that she deals with, but you can see how some people in public just don't get them. There's just not that passion or compassion or heart. So while you said like it's easy for me, I only think it may be easy because you've grown so much, right? So
Hmm.
because it's the weight of what it is for somebody else, they may shut down and freak out. I have watched it, but for you to go like, oh, like it's easy, it's like, oh man, you've had a lot of growth. So do you mind sharing maybe what are some of the things that you found in the beginning were difficult that maybe you had to battle to get to have strength in it?
So, if you're talking about my child particularly, then his diagnosis is actually so marginal that he's an easy child in the sense that there is
Okay,
people usually don't know that his brain works differently.
gotcha.
So, in that case, I think the learning point was for me that you do have to turn for professional help if you have
Mm,
issues in life. You
got
don't have to solve everything. It's interesting how we are not. Trained to deal with life's issues with professional help. Somehow we're supposed to figure everything out
mm,
when we go out in life, and that happens in the circumstances where schools give us only academic education,
mm,
which is not really about life.
enough, yeah,
But when it comes to my growth as a parent, then of course the first lessons, because the children when they're small they teach you slightly different lessons. The first lessons were about patience, were about understanding that love alone is not always enough in relationships, in anything.
yeah,
Also understanding the meaning of unconditional love, something which I think we get the closest to with our children. But also they were a lesson in prioritizing myself in a reverse way, but they were. I
yeah.
mean,
Interesting.
I think it took some stress before I suddenly realized that, oh, it's fine to want to be happy.
Mm,
It's okay. It's not selfish. And
okay.
then a little later already, uh, I guess one of the biggest lessons which I learned from my children, and I think it's one of the most profound lessons in life in general, was that everybody has the right to their journey, and that includes the right to their own mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing for a
Ooh,
parent, because
that is.
we as parents want to save the day. We want to protect our children from any kind of pain wherever we can protect.
Mhm.
So the few times when I had to make a conscious choice to allow my child to face the consequences of life not always turning to their advantage or to their liking,
Mhm.
where maybe I could have saved the day, these were the lessons which actually
Those are
expanded
big ones.
beyond my relationship with children.
So I tell my wife is the one who wants to come to the kids' rescue, and I say we cannot rob the kids of their hardships.
No.
Like there's a dynamic there where like they're given lessons that they need to learn, and I'd rather them learn the lesson with me in the household, being able to help
Yes.
guide them, as opposed to them being not subjected to it, or to bypass it, to face it when they're out of the household later. And that
Mhm.
is a difficult one. Is Did you find that between you and your ex-husband, one of you were more of like the, we'll handle it, and one of you, or were you both in the area of like, you kind of want to let them just figure it out?
Well, with children, fathers and mothers often assume a little different roles.
Very. My wife and I
So
are. Yeah.
I'm the one who's supposed to be saving the day. Fathers are usually the ones who, for whom it's a little easier to say, "You
It
figure
is.
it out," especially when it comes to boys.
Yep, I
And
agree.
with girls, it's probably a little different.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't want to judge Vision's journey here because. He has his own path, and of course, while I witness him as a father, but I also don't know his transformation with the children.
yeah,
So I wouldn't want to try to give characterization for him,
I
but for
appreciate
me, it was definitely an interesting lesson because, and I totally agree with how you explained it, uh, because. Uh, that's actually the definition of love when you're willing to love your child no matter what they choose and how they how they choose to make their decisions,
that.
knowing that you might disagree with them.
Yeah,
And yes, they learn the skills, the necessary skills for life. They learn uh, to the executive functioning
yeah,
evolves,
yeah. They do,
the
yeah,
problem solving skills evolve. But with that, also they also learn that challenges, problems, predicaments, hardships are a natural part of life. It's not something to be afraid of,
yeah,
to run away from, to feel like it's because we normalize the fact that yes, sometimes it's not what you. We don't make it a drama, but we also don't try to create this this artificial environment of no problems. And I think, when I started teaching about happiness years ago, that was one of the explanations that I like to give about happiness. People misunderstand happiness because we grow up in an environment where parents try to eradicate pain. So we grow up thinking that
yeah.
this is a viable scenario,
Mhm.
that you might happen to live in circumstances when there nothing unpleasant happens to you, but it doesn't happen like this.
Usual.
life
Yeah.
life doesn't work like this.
No, it does not. I actually have a painting of her on my wall here, and I got a tattoo of a little ship. I don't know if you can see it back there. It's like a little sail ship. There it is. And
Uh-huh.
it's so the statement is, "Smooth seas never made skilled sailors." And I didn't make the quote. It's a great quote though, because I realized like I kind of like the rough seas I endured as a kid. I appreciate them. Liking would be the thing. I
Mm.
appreciate them because they gave me the skill sets to be able to bypass a lot of things that would have shut me down as an adult. So I can excel more. I can also teach my kids more lessons, and it makes it a little bit smoother for me. So I love that you see that, because that's something a lot of parents, if they can understand that, it's hard in the moment to do it. But if you can, like, when your kids win, when they've battled something and they celebrate, it's a greater joy that I can express, because I know how hard it is, and like I don't want to help you, but then when you win, it's like, yeah, like glad to see them celebrate on that side.
But it goes deeper than that because skills are definitely necessary. It
Mhm.
goes deeper than that. If you look at it philosophically, who are you to judge what's right for a child?
True. Yeah.
Yeah, you might say, you might think so. We all think so. In Russian, they have a very bizarre word. It's actually a made up word, which means inflict good.
Hmm. Interesting.
And that's an interesting concept. That means that we do things out of our best intentions. I'm giving you this advice because I think this is good for you, but who am I to judge?
Yeah.
I do not really know, and you might dismiss this point of view. But if you look at the extreme examples of that, I was born in Soviet Union,
Mhm.
a society which prescribed what is good for me. All
Mm.
societies actually go. It's like a pendulum. We go from one extreme to another. But
Mhm.
there is this extreme form of society where you're being told that's what's good for you. I know. So
Mm.
you should do that, even if you don't buy it into that. And of course, in our everyday life, we are not really tyrants, or not Soviet Union, and no.
Yeah, I've been there. I visited one time. They were great people.
but but even with that said, we can't. You can say that's my opinion, that's what I feel,
Yeah. It's,
but you do not know what's the best for the other person.
yeah, you never do know. They get to make the choice. It's
It's
interesting.
tempting to think we do, but
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because at that point, like I get that it's going to be different, but we all have to coexist. I think this becomes the conversation of late, is like, well, who gets to choose what's right or wrong for you? What makes you happy? What's not make? And then I think a lot of people, this is what we're talking about earlier. I said that I can entertain the idea without accepting it. I think what we do is some people see that your belief of that being right or wrong is an active, I guess, derailment or an active opposition of my position. So if I
Mhm.
say I like bananas, right? You in your head could go like, okay, I'm glad that you like bananas. I don't, but that's okay. Somebody else can go, you say I'm wrong because I don't like bananas. You say I'm a bad person. I don't like bananas. No, I didn't say anything about you about bananas. I just said that I like bananas. And I think that creates a lot of the discourse in people because most people can't accept that just because someone doesn't believe it doesn't mean they say you should.
Mhm. Hmm. And well, if we go deeper down that road, what's we often profess truths without knowing what's actually the truth, and what's truth for you might not be the case for me. And when it comes to bananas and different point of views, who am I to judge what's good for you?
Yeah.
That's because we live in a society that says, oh, you're wrong, this is what you have to want, this is what you have to aspire for. We unlearn to hear our internal voice.
Mm,
And then we're surprised when we hit 40, 45 that I'm in a dead end. I've done all the right things. I've followed all the rules. I've I've set my own goals. I went for my own goals, and then I feel in the dead end because we unlearn hearing what is
mm,
right for me, because there is somebody well-meaning from the very beginning telling you this is not good for you.
yeah.
I think the best thing we can do for the people that we love is to remind them that no matter what, I am going to love you
Yeah.
always.
It's
That's
beautiful.
that's that's my that's my place. I'm going to keep my doors open for you, my light on for you.
Yeah.
Now, if people ask you for advice, that's a different story. If people ask you for help, if they ask you for your opinion, and then even if you express your opinion, they still have the right to make their own choice, and you should respect their choice. Because the thing is that very often, if I don't like bananas and you do, my reaction is not to the fact that I think that you're wrong about liking bananas because bananas may be bad for your health or whatever. My reaction to your information is reflection of my own shit. I'm sorry for using this
True.
word.
I agree. I'd agree. It is.
When me and Vision decided to separate, the amount of nonsense we heard was insane. But the one thing that I noticed, all that reaction had nothing to do with me, with Vision, and with our private decision.
Hmm.
Everybody reacted to the degree of their own triggers being,
Ripped. Yeah. Feeling
touched.
it. How they would approach it.
Yeah,
It's interesting you went into a relationship. So my wife and I, we were actually when I was at the A Fest events, I was divorced. I high school sweethearts, married, 3 kids, got divorced. Wasn't a fun divorce. There was no it was not amicable, we'll call it. And
yeah,
3 years went by, and it was craziness what ensued. In fact, there was like she had had an affair, and it broke my heart. It was all this, but then 3 years later, we got remarried. We're 6 years into a remarriage. My marriage is amazing. I love my wife and everything we have built. Yet there are a lot of people who hear, "Wait, you took her back after she cheated on you? What is wrong?" And that happens, and I have to realize, like, no, this is just you projecting onto me how you would deal with
exactly,
that. It's nothing to do with
exactly.
me. Yeah.
And it starts from small things. We think that we know better what's from the other person. But of course, if you have like a baby, of course you know what's better for that baby,
Yeah. Yeah.
at least until a certain age. But we have to start taking the steps back, because on one side, we are forcing people into doing things that they don't enjoy.
Hmm.
We are forcing that, whether we like it or not, but we do it left and right. And the other thing, when it comes to our own children, we actually deprive them of their faith in their own decisions.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. Because I look at me, here's my thought. I go, when my kids turn 18 and leave the house, I want to be able to sleep well at night, knowing that I gave them the tools and the confidence to succeed without me out there, at least to a modicum of, degree of success.
Yeah.
But that's a big one is if I don't give them the ability to make those choices, to put them in this situation, I can't coach to it, teach to it. They don't develop the skill and feel comfortable doing it on their own. And then I'm parenting them into their 40s, and I don't want to do that.
Well, you know what? It's not actually as funny as I was laughing, because the research shows that the contemporary youth who goes into university, I think they were researching, in fact, Harvard University,
Mhm.
the fresh kids who went there,
Mhm.
their executive functioning is very considerably lower than the executive functionings of the students of the late 20th century. It's
Interesting.
gone down. It's
Huh.
gone down because of our parenting style.
The
We
helicopter
deprive our children the right to make choices. We keep telling them that they're making wrong choices, that we know better.
parent. Yeah, it's the coddling. There's a book called "The Coddling of the American Mind," and I think it has to do a lot with
It's
that
not just
whole.
Americans, don't worry.
Yeah, no, I know.
The rest of the world suffers from the
It's a
same.
lot. Parenting, man, it's an open story, and it's I mean, there's no dialed way of doing it, and then this thought of, and you've been placed in this thought of like what's right and what's wrong. I think sometimes when we adopt that, it probably filters into how we view ourselves. Because earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that I learned through parenting, I got to put myself first, which tells me that
Of
some part of you said I wasn't doing that. But I'm assuming that something
course.
someone told you had. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit?
That was actually such a long story. It's interesting. As I said, I was born in Soviet Union, and that
Yeah.
society was very idealistic, and we, we were idealistic about building communism. So
Yeah.
every single individual was less important, and that's how I was brought up until teenage
Gotcha.
years.
Yeah.
So it was very deep in my in my worldview. Plus, if you add to that classical literature of the end of the 19th century, also my favorite period. So I believed that the uh, most important thing for a person in their life is to be useful to the rest of the world.
Mm,
And I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I already had endured some of the trauma of life,
mm,
putting others first. And then I saw this strange poster. It was in a very unusual place, and it said something to the effect that it's okay if you prioritize your happiness. And I remember I was standing there, approximately 30 years old, looking totally puzzled, thinking, really? That was such a
thought.
strange thought that I was thinking, is that true? Is that possible? And then it was a few years later. So the story is actually, I like to tell that story. A few years later, I was working with refugees in Malaysia,
Okay.
refugees from Myanmar mostly, and we were building Mindvalley. So it was the early years of Mindvalley. So on one side, I see a lot of human tragedy on a daily basis because refugees from Myanmar usually lose everything: their families, their possessions, their home, everything. And then on the other side, we were building Mindvalley, a company that teaches people to live happy, fulfilled, extraordinary lives.
Mhm.
So I had this contradiction. You remember I was talking about contradictions in
Yeah.
relationship with yourself. It's also an invitation for growth and transformation. And then we happened to be at an event where Dalai Lama was speaking, and
Okay.
we had a little audience, not a very big audience, like 40 people.
Mhm.
And of course, I had to ask that question of him. I said, I can't reconcile these two worlds. I don't understand. I see the misery, but then I tell people that they have to be happy. It just doesn't,
Mhm.
it doesn't match.
Yeah.
And he said, Christina, and he, I mean Dalai Lama, he said, Christina, you can't help anyone if you're not happy.
Mhm.
And that was just like a sledgehammer. I was like,
Yeah.
really? And that person has really dedicated a lot of his effort to making this world a better place. Yet he said, you can't help anyone if you're not happy. And this is such a simple idea, yet somehow for us these two things seem to be polar opposites. It's like, if I want to be useful to the world, or if I want to be a good parent, or if I want to be a good entrepreneur, somehow we think that your own well-being and happiness are almost like the polar opposite. So you have either this or that.
Yeah.
But in reality, you can't have this unless you take care of your well-being.
True. Yeah.
And I talk about happiness and self-love. These are the two least sexy topics in our industry. You can't sell them very easily. But
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
funny thing is that I like to talk about those topics with very pragmatic people, with entrepreneurs who are not converts into personal growth and transformation.
Mhm.
And it's funny because they're the people who are like, oh, this is too wishy-washy. I
Woo-woo.
have
Yeah.
more serious things to take care of.
Yeah.
Economic crisis is looming. My clients are uh, whatever. I don't have enough clients, or my employees are not happy. Entrepreneurs think that they have more serious problems to take care of.
Mm.
Parents think that they have these children to raise, so that your well-being is not important. Any kind of professionals, we very often we put something important on a pedestal. It becomes an ideal, and we think that part of the deal is sacrifice of your own well-being and happiness or self-love, whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever wishy-washy thing it is, without understanding that your problems are going to be much easier to solve if you're in a good condition.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. There is not even just the problems, like every part of life. I look at my wife and I, we do two different things. She doesn't really understand my world, and that's okay. For one point in time, I want her to get it and pay attention. She's like, look, I love you. I just don't have the passion you have for that thing. And I thought it was a problem. I was like, no, I realized that the biggest thing is the marriage to be happy. And so I go, well, if I can try to stop seeking the happiness from her and I have, we'll call it outlets to communicate, it sounds interesting, but to have these deep conversations, I'm fulfilled and I feel happy. And then I
Yeah.
walk in the house or I go to and I'm in a good mood. She does what she does. She's in a good mood. We come together happy. So we parent happier. The kids are happier. We have joy in life. We can watch movies. So like that part. Also in my business, if I'm happy because I've taken my time to get a workout in, I've spent time with my family and I'm positive. When I show up to work and I'm the CEO, I have to put out fires. If I'm in a good mood, they get put out easier. Like
Yeah.
it helps
And we
massively.
forget that. We
Yeah,
forget that and we think it's either or. And when it comes to your wife, I want to say there's one more important aspect. Everyone has the right to their journey.
true. Yeah, 100%. I learned that the hard
This
way.
is,
It wasn't
and
easy.
this is for our industry, it's the hardest thing to learn.
Yeah, it really because we're so into it. And I think because I'm so into it, I need her to be into it to validate my being into it. I thought that was a thing. And it's like, no,
And then we inflict good on our loved ones.
there you go. Yeah, yeah. I'm a sniper with it. But I do. You find that in time, people they eventually watch you enough and go, man, you live this life that's joyous. Like, are you on drugs? Like, you really like this? I'm like, no, I'm just a happy
But
guy.
if they don't, but if they don't,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if they don't, then it's okay.
I
Because
guess so.
I think for me, it's like I realize that sometimes. No, this is actually matter of fact. Listen to this. We were leaving Puerto Vallarta. I was in the airport, and a woman that was at A Fest had a conversation of this exact thing going on in my marriage was a battle. And she goes, listen, you can't want more for someone than they want for themselves. And I go, ooh. And that has been like it's been ringing in my ears ever since then. And so, like, I can't want my wife to want this because then me wanting it creates a space where she feels inadequate, like I don't love her. And then I feel
Yeah,
like she doesn't love me because she's not into it. And I go, it has nothing to do with it. It's just her journey. She's doing her own thing. And I'm doing my thing. And I love to share the
exactly.
journeys we have together. And that creates a beauty of our relationship.
Hmm.
It's not easy to get there, though. Uh, I wish I could unpack that and plug it in people's heads because a lot of the conversations I have for people, they're like, "How do you do this?" And I'm like, "This is how we're just different, and we embrace the difference. And I do what makes me happy, and I build me, but I don't do it at the detriment of her. But I also know that sometimes like I need to say no to certain things because if I'm not in the space to do it, I'll do it, and it'll be bad for the marriage. If I do it just I'm in a bad mood, I'm gonna do whatever, right? I do it in a way that she now feels unloved. Oh, my microphone went down. That she feels unloved and it actually causes more detriment because she feels she can feel that I'm just doing it because I'm doing it. And so there's little
Hmm.
nuances to where like there's simplicity and a lot of intricacy to this whole thing. My brain's spinning on the idea of what this is right now. I'm going to come back to earth here for a second. I love what you're
I
talking
think
about. Makes a ton of sense.
I think it's the one thing that we don't catch on to early enough, that if you just let people be,
Yeah.
if you just allow them to express themselves and not decide for them what's good for them, then there's so much more trust and openness, and they actually are much more likely. I mean, I don't care about I know it will sound horrible, but I'm not in the business of changing other people.
Mm,
I can share my opinion
yeah.
and my observations. I've been in personal growth for 20 years.
Hmm.
And those who are ready and those who want this, yes, they might come and say that you've changed my life. But
Yeah.
that's not why I do that. If they come and say this idea doesn't gel with me, I have to be at peace without them validating me.
Yeah.
That's and why I say it's important is because if in 20 years in personal growth, what I've learned that there is no one recipe for life. And things change as life changes, as you change, as your
Yeah.
circumstances change. If you think about your own journey, what works for you right now, 5 years ago, it might have not made any sense to you. And what started you on this path 8 or 9 years ago, I don't know exactly, these lessons might be totally irrelevant for you right now. So, who are you to tell what's good for the other person? Maybe they're in a different stage of their life.
Yeah.
Maybe you're there telling them that, flying is awesome, but what they need to learn is walk.
Mm, yeah. That's really well put. And this is actually probably a good way to infuse this in the idea that like you're in we'll call it the business of changing people, but you do have thoughts you offer, right? Which is why you wrote your book, Being Flawsome. And so in that, and it's a great book. In the process of doing it, there's a lot of great ideas. And I think this is a great way to kind of have people hear this before they head over to grab the book. And do you mind just kind of unpacking a little bit about what the book's about, why you chose to write it? Because this is a great place for people to get exactly what you said, hear your thoughts and decide if they're for them.
So after I had made a little rant about how your well-being is important, I can say directly that this book is about self-love.
There you go.
So it's called Becoming Flawsome, and it's about finding your path back to you. And I think we did touch about on this topic a little bit. I think very often by the age of about 30, 40, 50, we kind of forget who we are. We're
Mm,
so busy doing the right thing, being successful, doing the career, following the ideals, which are probably good ideals, that we sometimes forget who we are. So I found myself in that situation where I kind of lived my life, but I wasn't there.
mm,
Like my body was there,
right.
but I wasn't there.
Mhm,
I found myself there at around 40, and it was an interesting experience because I started asking questions and trying to figure out what's going on and how to feel better. And eventually, I realized that what was going on is that I was missing from my own life.
mm,
There was this body of mine going through the motions,
mhm.
but I was not. Well, I'm going to say I was not in touch with myself. The book is actually really geeky or
No,
nerdy. I don't know which word is correct. It's I like research. I like scientists. So I do not make statements until I find some
true.
support to that, or if they're
Yeah,
Kristina facts, then I say this is Kristina fact.
yeah,
But the book is a journey back to you, and it's like any journey. I don't like to give spoilers, and my favorite analogy is that if you pick up Lord of the Rings, and from the very start that the Fellowship is going to break apart, and and such things are going to happen. It's kind of a
yeah,
spoiler, so I don't like
yeah.
giving spoilers to my book. If you don't
I get
mind.
that. Yeah, no, no problem at all. I get that. I actually hate when I watch a trailer and I go, I don't think I gotta watch the movie anymore. And then I do miss out on a good movie if I watch it later. So I appreciate that. But I think that is a conversation that we need to have. Because while you said the idea of journey back to self-love, there was something in that I think if this is I've looked at it from a logical standpoint of like I'll call it Anthony fact. I like that you like points of proof. But I've noticed that whenever somebody has a plan and they miss out on the plan, they drop the ball, that they feel less and less about themselves. They feel less respect. And I think if I lose respect for myself, it's hard to not respect someone and love them. Like it's some kind
Mm-hmm.
of weird, if I respect you, I can build into a love for you, I've found. And so when I tell myself, Anthony, you're going to do great this week, you're going to get your workouts in, and then I don't do that, I lose respect for myself. And I lose a little bit of love, and I show up a little bit less for myself next week in a sales conversation, in a team meeting for my company, if it might be right. So while we look at this from the standpoint of going, oh, it's just self love that people call it wishy washy woo woo, like there's a great deal of connection to you saying something and you following through and you building a self love and respect for yourself to continue building into what your mission is, your dream is, your business. So if you think that
Mm-hmm.
self love has nothing to do with your company, you are completely out of your mind.
Well, I understand that. Actually, I actually love that you use the word respect, because I can understand that respect is your expression of love.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, in fact, I'm just reading Bronte, uh, and she's talking. There's a whole passage I was just reading yesterday about respect and love.
Mhm.
So, so you talk similar to the classics, but what I want to say is that do you know that 85% of adults have very low self-esteem?
Oh, I didn't know that.
And self-esteem is not directly self-love, but self-esteem is very often a fruit of self-love or absence of self-love.
Mm,
And it is a prevalent problem. And one of the problems is that we misunderstand. We are afraid. We don't understand what it is. What is a healthy self-love?
mhm,
We have so many distortions. We think that that egocentrism is self-love, or excess of self-love, but it's not. We think that complacency is excess of self-love, but it's a distortion.
mhm,
uh, we often imagine our perfect picture of ourselves as a good a good indicator of self-love, but it's not. All those things that we misunderstand for self-love are actually the markers of its absence, of its lack.
Mm, interesting.
And that is why we don't talk about that, because it's hard to talk about something you don't understand.
Yeah.
So, in to add to the point that you were just bringing, your self-love matters particularly in the times when you're not at your best. That's when you need it the most.
Mhm.
It's like with children. When your child is good, it's easy to love the child. When the child is doing something you disagree with, can you look at that child and say you have the right to your journey and keep loving them if they don't listen to you, if they
Mm,
make a mistake?
it's hard, but yeah, I see what you're saying. That's really difficult.
Can you love yourself when you do that?
Mm,
That's the hard thing, because for me, children, the one thing that children taught me, coming back to your earlier question,
mm,
is they are the bar of self-love for me. If I, a very simple example. So I'm 45, and after two children and turning 40, I've put on a little weight. It's not much. I mean, I'm still wearing S&M mostly, as in sizes, but still,
yeah.
I'm not what I used to be in the 20s. So I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking like, yeah, but just a few more kilos. You know how it is, like a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah.
And then I pictured myself. Would I ever say that I love Hayden, but if he didn't have Asperger's, I'd love him more?
Mm,
And I started laughing because it didn't make any sense.
yeah. That's
But that's
crazy.
what we do to ourselves. And I talked about like the body image, which is a complicated topic.
Mhm.
But, you know, if you were not your best self, if you didn't perform that well, can you still love yourself? Can you forgive yourself? Can
Yeah.
you love yourself when you make mistakes? And that's when you need it the most. We live in a paradigm which glorifies punishment and fear as fuel for growth and transformation. But that's not the only paradigm out there.
Mhm.
My thesis is that self-love can give you so much courage that you will actually perform much better than when you perform from fear and punishment.
Mm, I'd agree actually. It's interesting because I have lived in both the state of the lack of self love for many years, and then the state of where I'm at now, and there is a complete difference in terms of how I show up, and how actually it's funny you say that, because there are times when my part of my brain spins up and goes, I don't know if you're ready to do that. Are you prepared for that? And then the other part of my I call it voice in my head is louder, and it goes, of course you can. You're Anthony, man. You got this. So I actually have to coax myself into that. But there's a self love, a level of self esteem that's there. But if that was less than like it was before, the energy would be vastly different in how I approach the world.
And then there's another aspect that, of course, you can do, but if you fail, I'm
Mm,
not going to take away my respect,
yeah.
because
Hmm.
at least you tried.
Yeah. It's a whole different thing.
That's where the courage comes in.
Yeah. That's good.
Very
You got
often, a lot of
yeah.
us, especially perfectionists, we are afraid to challenge ourselves because we are afraid that that will be the reason for us to stop respecting ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
I know I've been perfectionist all my life. I hate competition because it's another it's an opportunity for me to fail and to actually feel bad about myself.
Yeah. That's big because a lot of people they think that they are the failure, not that that person is beautiful in who they are, but they just failed a little bit and learned a lesson. And there's something I think for me, sports helped it a lot. I used to play professional football. And the one thing I express is like when you play a sport, you can still be a phenomenal in the game, do your thing in practice, but you're going to go to the side somewhere and watch yourself have played the game. And then you get to nitpick and pull apart things. And the ability to take a look at myself and go, I'm still great. I just made a mistake.
Yeah.
That's hard for people to do. But we were taught to do it in football, but I didn't apply it to my life for a lot of years. But when I have done that, I go, I'm still a great dad, still a great interviewer. I get to meet cool people. But I made a mistake over here. Like that's okay. It's not who I am. I just, this is me over here. I'm still great, but this is a part that it's opportunity if I so choose to see it to
Yeah.
improve.
But it's a completely different paradigm from where we grew up. Because
Yeah.
if you look at popular culture, at movies, at everything, we glorify the idea
Mm,
that you only move anywhere from the fear, from pain.
yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it is true. Now I think about it, it's always something went wrong, and then we make changes. But we can keep going. I just realized what time it is, and I know it's late for you, and I so deeply appreciate your mind, your heart. and coming on to share. So, two questions as we bring this to a wrap. I'd love to talk for longer, but the time does get to that point. So, here's the first question, and you can answer however you choose. But what promise did God or the Creator make to the world when they created you?
Me?
Yeah.
That it's all going to be cool and you should have fun.
There you go. I like it's a good one. That's a beautiful one. Especially if you I get that from being at A Fest, you guys. That is a phenomenal place. And you do that. You get to be cool and have a lot of fun and learn a lot of things too. It's also part of it. So I love that answer. It's a great one. Second question is, where can people go to find more about you, about the book, and all those good things you do?
Well, as a co-founder of Mindvalley, I would say come to Mindvalley because you'll find me there as well. But you can also go
Mhm,
to kristinamand.com, which is my website. Kristina is with a K. It's
mhm.
the
Yeah.
Estonian way of writing it. And the book is there as well. mindvalley.com/books/flawsome because it's not the only book, so it's books.
Yes. Awesome. Love it. So you guys go check the book out there. Thank you again for hanging out with me. I seriously appreciate your time, your hearts, your depth of knowledge, and it shows. And so I appreciate that. Those of you who are all hanging out with us now, thank you so much for hanging and being here. If something in this episode resonated with you, do two things. One, take a note and apply it to your life in some manner. Like just a single thing can change everything. And then also share it with somebody. If you know that something was stated that could help someone else's life, a simple share, even a timestamp would be beneficial to their life. Just go place in the atmosphere. You never know what the universe can do from that point in time. Outside of that, as always, make the most of your off shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Kristiana Mand Lakhiani signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Awe Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.